everyone. Sorry for a couple minutes late start. Just doing some technology issues up here. We're going to call a meeting of the Board of Supervisors and the Redevelopment Authority to order. Today is Thursday, December 21st, 2017. It's about 8:32, and we're in the Community Center at the Sierra Room at 851 East William Street. We're also streaming, and if you've got cable, we're on cable. Could we have a roll call for the record, please?
Good morning. Supervisor Abad. Here. Supervisor Bonkowski. Here. Supervisor Bagwell. Here. Supervisor Barrett. Here. Mayor Kroll. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Chad? Sir, come on up. Chad, St. Paul's Lutheran Family, get us started on the right foot and give us a good Christmas message.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good.
During this holiday season, the season where my tradition celebrates the coming of peace into the world, let us offer thanks for the bounty of our universe. Let us celebrate the diversity of spirit in creation. No two snowflakes, blades of grass, or flowers are the same. No man, woman, or child are exactly the same. Let us learn to appreciate the richness of our world bestowed with a multitude of religions, cultures, and nations. Let us continue our efforts to pursue justice and opportunity for all of our citizens. Let us work in harmony for the betterment of our community. Let us offer thanks for the food we receive when many walk in hunger. Let us offer thanks for our homes and families while so many go without family, friends, or place to sleep, especially on cold, cold winter nights. Let us offer thanks for the bounty of our lives. We ask that the divine presence be with us as we discuss this community's business on behalf of all of our citizens. We pray through your many names. Amen.
Thank you, Chad. Well said. You see the tie up here? This is Christmas.
I'm ready.
Lori's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, well, moving on to item number 5. This is public comment time. This is the time for the public to comment on any item that's within our jurisdiction. We also have public comment as we go through the agenda on each item as it's appropriate. If it's appropriate, it usually is. We also have public comment at the end, and we'll have redevelopment. We'll have public comments twice again there. So there'll be a lot of time for public comment. Anybody want to start off this morning? Okay, I don't see any, so we'll close off item number 5, and we'll take up item 6, possible approval of the minutes of December 7th, 2017.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the minutes of the Carson City Board of Supervisors for December 7th, 2017 as presented.
There's a motion, a couple seconds on the motion discussion. Oh, wait a minute.
That's not, the voting
It's
isn't
there.
coming up.
I got it.
Yours is, mine isn't.
Hang on a minute, folks. Let's see.
I'm special.
You're special.
You're all, never mind.
I don't have mine either, but,
Mine's not working.
all right. I don't know if we're getting all the electronic voting done here, but we'll work through it as we go through the morning. So on the motion, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. Let's take up the agenda. Mr. City Manager, any changes?
We would recommend pulling item 15A, I'm sorry, not 15A, my apologies. I'm sorry, 15B, 15 Bravo, Mr. Mayor. We'll bring it back at a later date, and we just have a couple items we need to work out with Partnership Carson City.
All right. Any board members want anything pulled? Okay, or moved? All right, we'll take up on item 16. That's the vitality matter. There's 2 agenda items on that, just so everybody knows. We will be taking both those agenda items up just because they're related to each other. And to save discussion time, we'll discuss both of those items at the same time, but we'll take individual separate motions on the items there. All right? All right. Let's go to the consent agenda. Anybody want something pulled from the consent agenda? Anybody? Okay, I don't see any. Let's move to,
Hold on. Yeah, I need to
we'll
check
go.
one thing here.
Check. all right.
Okay.
All right, we'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of 11B, which we'll take up right as soon as we can complete. Motion's in order.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of all items under item 8, 9, and 10, and 11A, pulling 11B.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Let's now take up, we're going to do 11A and B, right?
Just B.
B, 11B. All right. Somebody want to tee this one up? Stephanie? Ms. Hicks? Good morning. How are you doing today? Are you ready for this day?
I think so.
Good. All right. Just we have a question here, so just tee us up on what we're doing here. I know it probably caught you off guard a little bit, but go ahead and tee us up, and then we'll see where we go.
Good morning. For the record, Stephanie Hicks with Carson City Public Works. The item before you is for sale of 8.62 acre-feet of water rights that are located in Washoe Valley. We have brought this to you before under a couple of separate items. Originally, our desire and our intent was to sell these through an online bid system, a competitive system, because we did receive an appraisal for $50,000 for the value of these water rights, and initially we didn't want to accept a bid that was less than that. Through that online bid system, we only received one bid for $25,000, so the bid was denied. It did not meet the minimum, but we did come back to the board and ask if we could attempt to sell these in any manner possible. And so through staff and also through our consultant, Mr. Bruce Scott at RCI, we reached out to property owners and others we thought would have been interested in these water rights. And again, the only offer that has come back to us was from Mr. Smith for $25,000. And so at this point, based on the fact that these water rights will be up for forfeiture in April, we have made the decision or bringing the recommendation forward to sell these to Mr. Smith at $25,000.
All right, we're good.
I have a question. Stephanie, just for the record, what was the cost of the appraisal? Do you know?
You know, actually, I do not know what the cost of the appraisal was.
Okay. But it would be, our net is going to be less that.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And I don't have any objections to the terms or conditions of the sale of the water rights. Just a typographical correction on page 1 of the water rights purchase agreement. Paragraph 5.6 is in the agreement twice, so I just asked for it to be cleaned up. That was it. I just wanted to get that change on the record before we approved it.
Good catch. All right. If anybody doesn't think we read all this stuff,
Yeah.
we read it. All right. All right. Public comment on this one? Anybody? Everybody understand what we're doing? It's either going to sell it or it's going to go away. Become valueless. Okay. Motion's in order. Supervisor, you're about to go.
Resolution number?
We
For
also need-
11B,
We also need a resolution number
11B?
on 8D.
11B is 2017 R43.
Okay, thank you. I move to adopt resolution number 2017 R43, determining the Carson City's interest in water permit 36079, certificate 11627, located in Washoe Valley, totaling 8.62 acre-feet, is not required for public use, and to authorize the sale of those water rights to Julian Smith in the amount of $25,000.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We still don't have the voting on here, right?
No.
Okay, good, all right. Okay, motion passes. Okay.
And then we still need
Let's
a
go,
resolution.
we need a
number
resolution on 8D.
On 8D.
That's it.
That would be 2017 R42.
Let's revisit the consent agenda motion then. If you will do that, let's just reapprove the consent agenda and have that motion in there, that resolution number.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of all items under 8 with the resolution number for 8D being 2017 R42, all items under 9, all items under 10, and 11A.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. We all clear on what we're doing here? All right, on the motion, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. 11B is done. Let's take up the courts. Who's doing it? Item 13. Max? How's the third branch of government doing this morning?
Great, Judge just stepped out to use the restroom.
Oh, you want to wait for a minute? Let's just, go ahead and start. Then we'll go knock on a door if he's not in here.
The mayor will.
For the record,
Speak of the devil, here he comes. So, go ahead, Max.
For the record, Max Cortez, Court Administrator.
And the iconic Judge Tatro.
Iconic.
How's
You
that,
call
Judge?
my kids and tell them that.
Okay.
John Tatro, Justice of the Peace, Tatro. Start? Okay, so we're here because the legislature changed the time in which the Board of Supervisors or County Commissioners are to set the base salary for the Justices of the Peace. Used to be, it would be set in June or July following the filing period, and now it's December prior to the filing period, which makes more sense. Lets people know what they're going to be trying to earn in an election. So we're here to set that. We've given you an amount we feel is fair. It's below, really it's below what the average is in the region a little bit, and we certainly don't think we have an average court here. We think we run a really good show and strive at doing that. We just want to make sure that the salary is set so that it attracts competent, capable people to run for the position.
Supervisor Abel, go.
John, would you address the fact, years ago, it wasn't required to be an attorney in order to have this position, but now how things have changed and why the need to attract folks that really can get up to speed quickly?
Right. Well, it's still, the requirement is not to be an attorney. You don't have to be an attorney. You have to have graduated from high school and not be an idiot. That's according to the Nevada Constitution. I feel I fall into that. Well, I don't think I'm an idiot. Most days. Again, tell my kids that. The job, I started in 1995, and when I started, the caseload was remarkably lower than it is now, and the complexity was much, well, it was much less, they were much less complex, the cases. Now we see a whole lot of motion work. Our calendar is very busy. We don't ever have a day. We don't go into court. We're in court 5 days a week. We actually do court business 6-7 days a week, but we're in court 5 days a week with a full calendar, and you just don't have the time that we had back in I had in 1995 to learn the position, to learn things. You have to know when you come in, because there's no time to learn. It's just the day you start, you're jumping in both feet, and you have to be prepared, and you have to be in that position. And really, the only way to do that is, I feel, and I feel a little bit hypocritical saying this because I'm not an attorney, but I think you need to be an attorney. I know you need to be an attorney. If I were to start today with the exact same background I had, I'd flounder. I'd be lost. And I was a hearing officer for 8 years at the Gaming Control Board and was a peace officer, so I understood the process in that, but it's just a different world today, and I think it's very important that the candidates, or that the position be filled with an attorney.
I'll take a pass on that one since I am one. I'm a retired one, so maybe I qualify as the idiot. All right, Supervisor Bagwell.
Good morning. So My question's more a little bit technical, that currently we provide longevity for the judges, and I just want to make sure that that longevity statute deals with all other elected officials. So in our motion, do we really need to include that we're going to continue the longevity just as instead of just the base salary, that we're going to continue the longevity? Because I don't know if we have any resolutions or anything that, so I just, as a technical thing, want us to include that in our motion.
All right. Any other questions? I know everybody's taking a close look at this. Public comment, anybody? I don't see any. Okay, we ready for a motion? Let's see where it goes. Somebody want to try a motion? Supervisor Bagwell will do a motion.
I move to set the Justices of the Peace Municipal Court Judge's base salary to $145,000 beginning January 1, 2019, and to continue the longevity schedule in accordance with the same as all other elected officials in Carson City.
There's a motion and a second by Supervisor Abowd on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Judge. Thank you, Max. Give our best to, hey, Judge, give our best to the court over there. You know, you mentioned, that we're a pretty good court system here. We're not just pretty good. We're blessed to have good people over there right now. And, sometimes we see in the news, things going on. We never have any of that. It's a big part of the way your justice system works is a big part of what makes a community a healthy and safe community, and you guys do a great job at doing that. So I think I speak for all of us when we say that. So,
well, thank you very much. And I think currently with the group of judges that we have, we all get along and we work hard, and we have Max to control us and to point us in the right direction. Judge Russell says she's the best manipulator in the city, so we do whatever she tells us. But thank you very much.
And we will be missing you.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I'll miss you guys. It's been a great run. Thank you.
All right. Let's take up, where are we then? Let's take up 14A. Let me see here. All right, you want to take up 14 and 15 at the same time? Can we do that?
Yeah.
What we want to do?
We can do that.
All right, because this is a service agreement, the second is lease, 15B is,
It would be 14A and 15A, Mr. Mayor.
15A, and then we're going to pull the other one, okay? All right.
Okay, for the record, Nikki Aker, Director of Carson City Health and Human Services. So just a little explanation here. This is two agreements between the city and Vitality Unlimited. The agreement that I'm going to address is the service agreement, and that has a scope of work or services to be provided as an attachment A. And then the other agreement that will be discussed is the lease agreement, which is 15A. And I just wanted to point out that there was some inconsistency of information, and for clarification, Supervisor Bagwell brought this to my attention. Under the staff report and in background issues and analysis section, it stated that 3 beds will be provided at no cost to the court for placement of patients in need of treatment. And then the scope of work states that residential treatment would be provided to 36 individuals per year, and that the 36 individuals per year was a change made at the last minute. It still equates to the 3 beds per month, but it also gives us flexibility if we're not able to have 3 individuals go into treatment. So it's up to 36 per year, and Vitality had requested that change. And as outlined in the scope of work, Vitality Unlimited has agreed to provide a number of services in exchange for monetary rent. I have with me Colleen Lawrence, who's representing Vitality Unlimited, and she can provide just a brief overview of some of the services under this agreement that Vitality will be providing.
Good morning, Colleen. Do we have questions of Nikki first before we go on? Yeah. Okay, Supervisor Barrett. And,
Yeah, could you just go over that 3 and 36 again? I didn't quite understand what you were saying.
Yeah, in the staff report, it indicated that there were 3 beds per month that Vitality would provide to the city at no cost.
Okay.
And then under the scope of work,
So that's the 36, 3
yes.
times, yeah.
Yeah, 3 times 12. So it gives us a little more flexibility. So I appreciate Vitality requesting that change.
Okay, I've got lights down here too. You want to go, Wade? Or you want-
Nikki, per our conversation, could you just reiterate some of the corrections and adjustments that Vitality has agreed to? We had some issues before, I think, related to security and qualified staff. So if you just address that, that'd be great.
Sure. So as far as qualified staff, then Vitality in the scope of work has agreed to have a minimum of 1 fully licensed counselor on premises at all times, and that is under 1.1. And then as far as security, we've been in the same building for a couple years now, and I do have to say that when there is an issue, we call Vitality and work things out very quickly. They are very responsive.
Good morning. So, Nikki, one of the issues dealing with the 36 and the 48 under the 2 different conditions, I'm assuming you're going to be monitoring, or the court system will be monitoring the referrals. But would you watch it quarterly or kind of let us know how that's going? Because one of the recommendations potentially for the future is I'd suggest changing that to bed days so that the court is guaranteed the placements by bed days. So it's just a thought.
Absolutely. And we also have in the scope of work that Vitality is going to come and report to the Board of Health biannually, so that information can be presented then.
Other questions, Nikki, before we go up to Colleen? Colleen, go.
Good morning. So my name is Colleen Lawrence. I am with Moxie Health Policy, and I'm a consultant for Vitality Unlimited for all of their sites. And for the last 6 months, I really do want to appreciate and thank for this collaborative initiative with the city, the judicial system, and the sheriff's office. We've been working closely to look at how we can increase our efforts here in Carson City. This has not just been a one-time thing to look at the contract, but what we can do for Vitality as a better partnership. All over Carson City. So such as I've done ride-alongs with Sheriff Furlong and with his officers to see how we can improve access to care. We looked at the civil protective custody and what we could do to improve that process. We looked at the residential beds, looked at how we can improve programming in the outpatient. So it's not just about the contract. It was looking at what we could do for Carson City as a whole. We have done, as you can see in the contract, we made it a inclusive contract for improving behavioral health services for Carson City. Vitality Unlimited is very vested on making sure that they are a better partner for Carson City, not just having a facility here. They've been here since 1971 in Nevada, and they are definitely vested here. So their services that they're offering right now are residential treatment for substance use, detox, and civil protective custody. We've made changes already for the sheriff's office to ensure that there's better improvement in his budget. And so that's what you'll see throughout the contract, is making sure that the reporting, as we look for the reporting, it also says that it will be mutually agreed upon so we can continue through the process. My background is actually, I oversaw the clinical teams for Medicaid for over 16 years, so I understand looking at access to care and what we can do. You'll see that we did improve and look back and work back with Dan and Iris on the contract to make sure that there was things that we could do for when we did the 48 individuals at the last minute. It was because the bed days, it wasn't honestly a benefit for Carson City. Looking at 48 individuals was ensuring that the referrals were continual. And that way we could look at what we could do to make sure it ebbed and flowed for Carson City. Working with Max to make sure that the referrals, I always like to say there's always an urban myth in behavioral health. The licensed professionals have been on staff for Vitality for quite some time, and we saw from immediately that urban myth was out there. There are licensed professionals right now in the facility. We do want to encourage interns because we know that there's a shortage of behavioral health professionals, so we do want to grow them, but we will always have licensed professionals in the facilities, and there are licensed professionals right now throughout that facility. We are also doing something new in Vitality here in Carson City, is that we're implanting mental health professionals also, not just substance use professionals, so that's something new that you will see here in Vitality. The last piece of it is, like I said, the reporting will continue, and we will modify the reporting as needed. And that's something that we've talked with the city manager about, because I understand reports, and it's all about data, in all honesty, that we need to be able to modify that data and see how we can not only respond, but be proactive on what's needed in Carson City. We are available. We also assigned myself as the Carson City liaison for all criminal justice activities for Vitality, and the sheriff definitely knows how to get a hold of me at all times, so we will be available from going forward. And I'm available for any questions that you guys may have. And I apologize because I do talk fast.
Okay, this is just a comment. On the services agreement, we're trading the value of the rent on the building for the services provided under the service agreement. So I wanted to make sure that the value of those services was somewhat equal on both sides. So I've run those numbers, and thank you, Nikki and Kenny Furlong, for getting me the numbers on the treatment side. So on the treatment side, the treatment being provided is basically up to a value about $118,000 per year based on the 36 people and the 48 people. So we don't know that we're actually going to use all of those, but if we did use all of those, then the value of that is about $118,000 per year. On the rent side, the value is about $105,000 a year plus the cost of utilities, which is reimbursed on the agreement. So looking at it from the financial side, it's, I think the city has a slight advantage, but that's a hard cost as opposed to an up to value on the other side. So to me, the agreement seems pretty fair, which I wanted to make sure of, for the taxpayers. So that's my comment on the actual service agreement. I also have a couple of changes, suggested changes to make to the lease document itself. Two changes, and this on all the leases that we look at today, these will be the same changes. On page 11 of 15, which is paragraph 15, this is the paragraph that deals with if we sell the building and give notice to the tenants to vacate when they have to be out of the building. And there's a conflict in the language. In one place it says that we have to provide notice to the tenant no sooner than 30 days prior to the close of escrow. But then in this paragraph it says that the tenant has the right to stay until up to 30 days after the close of escrow. So that language needs to be changed to on or before the date of the sale or conveyance.
So want to read that into the record where that would be.
Sure. So it would be line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, line 6, page 11 of 15. The line will read, well, I'll start with line 5, consideration or compensation for the termination, and that lessee will vacate the premises on or before the date of the sale or conveyance. So we're deleting the words not more than 30 days after and replacing them with on or before.
Got it.
Because we have two options. We're either selling the property to an investor who's going to want the tenant to stay, and they have the right to do that. The other option is we want to deliver an empty building, and we need to be able to do that at the close of escrow, not 30 days after the close of escrow. And then the second change is in paragraph 25, which is on page 13 regarding snow removal. We don't have any parameters. It just says that we're responsible for snow removal, but doesn't provide the parameters under which we do that, which we have levels of service through Parks and Rec that dictate that. So I just want to reference that. So 25 would read, snow removal, snow and ice removal from the grounds shall be the responsibility of city and in accordance with the appropriate maintenance level described in the Carson City Parks and Recreation Master Plan as may be amended. And thank you, Dan, for that language. And that's all my comments.
Good comments. Supervisor Abel.
You're talking about collecting. Will you be monitoring any repeat offenders, recidivism, in other words, so that the success of what you are, the services you are providing, gives you a benchmark?
That is an excellent idea. We will be looking at that. We've already seen that happening through the CPC program. And those individuals who are coming through continuously, we are actually putting them through the high utilizer group in Carson City right now. So we will look at how we can monitor that. Thank you.
Before I go, I guess I didn't understand it. Would you run that by me again, please?
So there are individuals who are repeating through the program, through like CPC or Civil Protective Custody. And so what we do is we are taking that to the next level and looking at how we can, they're not appropriate maybe for, let's say, detoxification, and they need to have alternative treatment. And so what we're doing is we're working with other individuals in the community to see how they can have alternative treatments. A different type of case management is now kicking in.
And Nikki, are there other alternatives in our community?
Yes.
Like who?
So,
Like who?
so what we do is we start looking at working with the shelters in the community. We start looking at other mental health treatment and seeing what we can do. We just get kind of the best of Carson City together and seeing what we can do. These are the, if you want to call the 2 to 3% high utilizers within Carson City. And so we like to get together and see what we can look for alternative placements for these individuals.
All right, thanks. Lori, excuse me. Go ahead.
So I just want to clarify on the projected cost savings that are occurring, and because I didn't get $118,000 in the value of that. So when you do your report, if we can also track the actual costs, because again, if you take the number of clients times 1,500 and then you take the detention budget of the sheriff's office to eliminate days at the jail for a protective custody, I'm only getting around $60,000 in my projection. So if we can just add that, so again, when we get to the 3-year mark, or maybe 6 months before the 3-year mark to negotiate the contract again, if we could just solidify the numbers, that would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Having a little numbers discussion up here.
It's okay.
It's all right.
Good.
All right, we're good? Okay. All right. Anything further on the lease? Term?
The term of the lease currently is proposed as a 3-year term for the lease.
Renewal provisions?
There are renewal provisions that they are allowed to come in and request upon expiration of the initial lease, request a renewal that will come back before the board.
All right. Go.
I actually have a comment on that as well. I'm going to sit down, we're going to go through the template with staff on the lease like we did with the vendor contracts, because, for instance, the renewal, that language doesn't even need to be in here, because all it says is that you can come in and ask for a renewal, but it's completely at our discretion. You have no option to renew. you can just come in and request it. So we need to change that language as well. So we will be sitting down and trying to come up with a new template.
Okay, all right. Anybody else? Other questions, comments? All right, are we good on both items here before I take public comment? All right, public comment, anybody want to weigh in on either one, the service agreement or the lease? I don't see any. All right, we'll take a motion on item 14 alpha then on the services agreement.
I move to approve contract number 1718-118, a services agreement between Carson City and Vitality Unlimited, a nonprofit Nevada corporation.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay, let's take up the lease. 15 alpha.
I move to approve the lease of 6,998 square feet of the second floor of the building located at 900 East Long Street to Vitality Unlimited, a nonprofit Nevada corporation, in exchange and as consideration for the provision of certain services in accordance with contract 1718-118 by and between Vitality Unlimited and Carson City, with the noted changes to paragraphs 15 and 25
Second.
of the lease.
Motion second on the motion. Discussion.
It's discussion.
Discussion's in order.
So I just want to thank Vitality Center for being a partner in this. Many of our nonprofits, and in the past, we rent buildings for $1, but thanks for recognizing that we actually needed some service to go with this. So I think this is a good model for nonprofits in the city to work together to meet needs. So thank you.
Thank you. We greatly appreciate it, and we look forward to the future. I think this is really innovative, and I think it's exciting. And over the next 3 years, I think we're going to see some pretty big things here in Carson out of this one.
I guess that's a two-edged sword. When you see really good things, that means there's more demand. Not certain.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. All right. All right. Any other questions or concerns? Any other public comments are here? All right, let's take, we did on this one, the second motion. On the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay, let's take up, we pulled 15B. We're going to bring back Partnership Carson City. Let's take up 15 Charlie. We'll open a public hearing on water right applications 85956 and 85958 through 85961. There's a public hearing is now open to take comments with respect to changing the point of diversion for surface water rights from lands in Carson City to Lyon County for water rights applications 85956, 85958 through 85961. Mr. Schultz, you're going to do this today?
Good morning, Darren Schultz, Public Works Director for the record. Item 15C and 15D go along with one another. The first one is the public hearing, as was mentioned. The next one is an actual action that they're requesting of us that is required by the State Engineer's Office. What's going on here is a privately held water rights, surface water rights that are currently come out of Carson River in Carson City. The owner would like to move that down into Lyon County and pull those water rights out of down there. So they're asking to do that. This is not a surprise to us. This has been the plan all along. They've been waiting for development to pick up in Lyon County to actually move the water. This isn't a bad thing for Carson City. We're relatively neutral through it. Because it's surface water, it doesn't affect our system whatsoever, and we have no reason that we would want to oppose this.
Okay. This is a public hearing. Anybody want to weigh in? I don't see any, so with that in mind, then we're going to close the public hearing. We'll take up item 15D. This is possible action to recommend to the state engineer that Carson City does not object to the approval of water right applications 85956 and 85958 through 85961. Motion's in order. Motion's in order.
I move to recommend to the state engineer that Carson City does not object to the approval of water right applications 85956 and 85958 through 85961 for transfer of water rights from Carson City to Lyon County.
There's a motion and a second. On the motion, just to clarify once again that this has no effect on Carson City's water rights.
That is correct.
This is a private transaction of moving water rights, and it's surface water, so it doesn't affect, has no effect on either our surface rights, well, it wouldn't anyway, or our groundwater.
That's correct.
Yeah, all right. All right, thank you very much. All right, let's take up 16. Do you need a minute to get?
We got to vote.
Oh, vote. Forgot to vote. On the motion, let's have a motion then. On the motion, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Run out. Where's my?
We're moving right along.
Yeah, moving right along, but
I have disclosure.
The mayor wants us to move faster.
yeah, I'm moving too fast myself.
Faster.
All right. Do we need a minute to get set up?
Just a minute.
Well, why don't we stand and recess for about 5 minutes? We're moving pretty quick, so we'll take about a 5 or 10 minute recess, and then we'll come back and take up the audit. Okay, you guys ready to go down here? All right, let's take up the items under finance. The first one is presentation only. Want to go through it?
I have a disclosure.
Oh, disclosures, I'm sorry. Supervisor Bagwell has a disclosure, right.
Thank you. NRS 281A 420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from participating when I have a disqualifying conflict. My son works for Eide Bailey. However, my son is not assigned to Carson City and has had no involvement whatsoever with the financial report nor the audit that is the subject of this agenda item. Therefore, a reasonable person in my situation would not be materially affected by this relationship. As such, this is not a disqualifying conflict, and I will be participating in this matter.
Very good. All right, any other disclosures? I don't see any. Okay, let's go. Mr. CFO.
Jason Lake, Chief Financial Officer. So today's presentation is from Dan Carter with Eide Bailey to go over the results of the audit and a subsequent agenda item to accept the audited financial statements for the city for June 30th, 2017 fiscal year end. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan to do his presentation.
Good morning, Dan.
Good.
All right.
Good morning, Board of Supervisors. For the record, Dan Carter, engagement partner on the Carson City external audit. Just want to start by saying, as we go through this, definitely don't hesitate to stop and ask questions. As we go, no reason to hold them to the end. All the information that we'll go through is in the comprehensive annual financial report that you guys have been provided. And I always like to point Board of Supervisors to the management's discussion analysis section on pages 12 through 21. It's kind of a plain language description of the financial statements and the activities of the year, comparative analysis with a focus on the current year. So if you're going to read one thing in the CAFR, that's the thing to read. This presentation, similar to prior years, we'll go through some fiscal highlights. We'll discuss the summary of audit results, and then we'll talk about a GASB that's coming up and will need to be implemented next year and its potential impact on the financial statements. So if we look at Carson City from the governmental activities perspective, this is kind of the accumulation of all the general funds, special revenue funds, debt service, capital projects, internal service, all the governmental activities combined on a full accrual basis. In the statement of net position, you can see that assets, the blue line, increased about $10.4 million over the prior year, primarily related to capital assets and pension-related amounts. You can see liabilities increased slightly at $5.2 million. That's almost exclusively related to your retirement obligations. The difference between assets and liabilities is your net position. Again, an increase over the prior year of about $5.2 million. If we look at the from the statement of activities perspective, this is your revenue, expense, and change in net position. You can see revenues are up over the prior year, $5.5 million. That's primarily related to capital grants and an increase in the C-tax that the city received. The expenses are also up about $2.7 million, and this is kind of across the board. All functions and programs were up slightly to get to that $2.7 million increase. With revenues outpacing expenses, you can see again that increase of the net position of about $5.2 million, that yellow bar. So breaking down the detail, revenues by source for governmental activities, you can see property taxes are up there at number one. Consolidated taxes are your second largest revenue source, and then other taxes. And this pie chart looks almost exactly the same as it did last year, with those being your primary revenue sources. Expenses by function for the governmental activities, again, very, very similar to the prior year. Public safety, always way out in front at number one. General government, your second highest expense by function. And then actually Public Works beat out Culture and Rec this year for the third position. Culture and Rec was slightly higher last year. If we look at the general fund specifically, this is kind of a 5-year trend of revenues and expenses. You can see definitely a positive trend line there with increasing revenues, and obviously expenses go along with that, but revenues are continuing to outpace expenses, which is always a good thing. Over last year, revenues are up about $3 million for the general fund, again related to intergovernmental revenues, primarily that C-tax number. And then expenses are up about $1.3 million across all functions, again, just slight increases in every area. If we look at the fund balance for the general fund, this breaks down the various types of fund balance last year to this year. The very bottom, we'll start at the most restricted, the very bottom, that $400,000 is your non-spendable fund balance. This is items that are tied up in formats like inventory or prepaids. They're not available to be spent on anything. The red bar is your restricted. These are restricted by external sources, typically grants, statutes, or voter-approved sources. The lighter blue color is your assigned. These are internal assignments of fund balance, primarily fund balance reserved for subsequent year's budget items. And then last is your unassigned. This is available to be spent on pretty much anything. And you can see an increase in all those levels from the prior year, in particular with the unassigned fund balance going from $6 million to $6.5 million. There is more detail in the notes to the financial statements on what exactly the restrictions, assignments, and what makes up the non-spendable piece on pages 62 and 63 of the CAFR. So if we take a step back and look, again, from a government-wide perspective, focusing on the business type activities, this includes sewer, water, ambulance, stormwater, cemetery, and building permits. You can see again, positive trends. Assets were up about $25.2 million. Primarily due to CIP, and also cash was higher this year than last year. Liabilities were up about 19.1 over the prior year, primarily related to new debt issues. And again, net position increasing $6.1 million, which is always a good thing. From the statement of activities perspective, revenues and expenses, you can see revenues up about $3.1 million, almost exclusively related to charges for services in the sewer and water fund. Expenses were up ever so slightly, about $200,000, just slight increases across all functions. And then again, with revenues outpacing expenses, you see the increase in the net position of about $2.9 million over the prior year. So that's all I have as far as financial highlights. Any questions or comments before we move on? So we get into the audit results. In particular, we provide 3 reports as a result of our audit. The independent auditor's report on the basic financial statements is on page 9 to 11. The independent auditor's report on internal control and financial reporting and compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards. Really long name. We typically refer to that as our Yellow Book audit report on page 188 and 189 of the CAFR. And then our report on compliance for each major federal program and internal control over compliance required by uniform guidance. Our single audit report is on page 190 and 192. So as it relates to our independent auditor's report, happy to tell you guys that we had an unmodified opinion. This is the highest level of assurance that we can provide over the financial statements. The disclosures of compliance related to NRS and NAC are in Note 2B to the financial statements on page 45. And again, happy to report we noted no over expenditures throughout the year, so definitely a good thing.
Dan, I did have a question.
Absolutely.
I know you moved on here, but could you go back to the historical graph on revenues and expenditures?
For the general fund or?
General fund.
Yeah.
If you look at 2013, the difference between revenues and expenditures just for that fund are about $5 million.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2017, it's about $7 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can I draw any conclusion from that?
That's a really good question. You mean why is revenue so much higher than
what I'm getting
expenses?
at is, I want to make sure that this government, that, what we're doing, I think I speak for all of us here, we want to make sure that what we're doing here is the most efficient, running government the most efficient way we can. And I'm just wondering if that analysis, and it's a short form, a little question, but if that doesn't speak to that, I mean, because clearly revenues have exceeded expenses, and expenses have pretty well held the line, at least in the general fund. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think maybe your point's maybe more clearly emphasized in this table where you see that fund balance of $9.4 million. So basically, over the last 5 years, your revenues outpacing your expenses have added to your fund balance, which is your ability to spend on future projects or items as they come up. And obviously, more recently, with the revenues being substantially higher than the expenses than they were 4 or 5 years ago, that's where you get to a fund balance of, $9.4 million with 6.5 available to be spent on projects or future items as they come up.
All right. City Manager?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to offer a few thoughts on that. So if you look at what is the greatest percentage of cost in terms of the general fund, about 3/4 of it are people-related, salaries, benefits, and so on. We have maintained a very strict accountability in terms of growing the number of full-time city employees. And I think that accounts for part of that growing, the growing comparison between revenues and expenses. We've kind of held the line on full-time employees, especially in the general fund. I think in the coming budget year, we may have a couple of new positions that are really reflective of the growth in the local economy and our requirement to meet some of that demand. But we're always going to maintain a very careful view of creating any new full-time position. And I think more than anything else, that explains part of it. I think the other major part is very conservative and careful fiscal management of the city by the former CFO. And I think Nancy did a fantastic job. I'm sure Jason is going to continue. But so I think you combine careful fiscal management and controlling the growth of employees, and we're going to continue to grow that that gap between revenues and expenses.
Well, I would say you also are looking at a board here that has been policy-wise growing the ending fund balance. I know that there's a lot of push sometimes to lower that to like 5%, but I think the board and the staff have been very conscientious to be conservative in all of our work and to ensure we have a good safety net. So we're working pretty hard here to get to the 8.3% goal. So I'm pretty proud that the city's gotten there. And when you look at our actual fund balance, we've hit a target. So if we can carry it through in the next budget to finish that last 0.2% or something, that we're pretty fiscally efficient. I liked your word, efficient. So good job.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. I interrupted you. Go back to your detail.
No, that's okay. And maybe just one final point. Obviously the last 5 years look very good. We've been in this meeting and those bars haven't always been with the blue bigger than the red. It's been the other way around, coming out of the last recession and that sort of thing, so.
That's because the CFO goes out and beats the sales tax numbers all the time.
Good news, Nancy.
All right.
All right, so back to the auditor's results. Went through the 3 reports that we provide, unmodified opinion. So if we look at our Yellow Book report, again, not an expression of an opinion, just our report over internal controls. We did identify 2 material weaknesses as part of our audit. One issue was an overstatement of cash that we found as part of our procedures. The second were some incorrect numbers disclosed in the notes and the corresponding RSI for OPEB. Did not have any other findings. No significant deficiencies were reported as part of our audit. If we look at the single audit, specifically, we did issue a modified opinion on compliance. We did have 2 material weaknesses over the major federal programs. Again, just want to point out, not an expression of an opinion, but just a report on internal control. Both findings related to the highway planning and construction cluster. The first one, just lack of evidence of review and approval as we were reviewing expenses that were submitted for federal reimbursement. We did note that there were some that had been previously submitted and reimbursed that were reimbursed again in our testing. So we did have some minor question costs. And then again, related to highway planning and construction, our second finding was just not following federal procurement guidelines, although some of those contracts are submitted for federal reimbursement. So those were our findings related to the single audit. Any questions or concerns on those? We do also follow up on prior year findings. We'd had 3 findings reported in the prior year, all single audit related. Corrective action had been taken on 2 of the 3, and finding 2016.1 we found to not be corrected. And again, this is due to lack of evidence of review on the federal financial reports prior to submission. It's our understanding that they're being reviewed, but when we come in to look at them, there's no support that we can see. So, and then the last part that I've got for you guys is a discussion of upcoming governmental accounting standard. Next year, the city will be implementing GASB 75 as it relates to pension plans. Currently, OPEB, your other post-employment benefits other than pensions. Right now, your OPEB liability is disclosed in the notes and in the RSI. The liability on the financial statements is actually just the shortfall of the current costs. You're on a pay-as-you-go basis. And so if that pay-as-you-go doesn't meet the actuarially determined current cost, the difference is reported as a liability on the financial statements. Currently, it's about $26 million. The true liability for OPEB to the city, as determined by the actuaries, is actually about $63.6 million. There are some assets accumulated to offset that of about $750,000. So we're looking at about $62.8 million in liability that will come on the books next year under 75 that has historically just been disclosed in the required supplementary information.
So does that mean one of those neat charts for a net position won't look as pretty when we have to book? Right? It means it's going to be negative is what I'm... that number was big that you just said. So,
absolutely.
It will significantly reduce fund equity at the government-wide statement level, but it will not go negative.
Do we have enough to cover?
I haven't looked at the allocation between proprietary business-type activities and governmental activities, but in total, we are fine.
Yes, yeah. Your unrestricted net position in the government activities has been negative for the last couple years, ever since we implemented the pension standard.
Right, that's what I said. We're going to just...
Huge liability that came on the books a couple years ago. So this will swing that unrestricted piece further negative, but with the other categories of net position being positive, I imagine you'll still have enough total net position to cover that, absolutely. The unrestricted and the business type activities may or may not, depending on the allocation, as Jason mentioned, may swing negative. But again, there's a lot of net position and sitting in net investment and capital assets to cover that. So you should still in total be.
And it'll be consistent across all of Nevada because everybody has to implement the GASB. So we won't be unique in the fact that all of our assets
we will not be
down.
We will not be unique, and everybody in the nation will actually be implementing the standard.
Yeah, and just to follow up on Lori's comment, I think what she's getting at is, will this affect, say, our credit rating or bond rating, which is one of the mayor's favorite issues. And since everybody's in the same boat, I assume that when credit rating agencies look at it, they are going to take that into account.
We certainly hope so. We're going to be talking, we have the next bond issue later this coming fiscal year, and we'll be talking with our bond issuers at that time and see what the likely impact will be.
Well, and unfortunately, we have no control over this item either.
No, and we didn't see a significant hit to anybody's bond ratings with the implementation of GASB 68 when the pension liability came on the books. Again, I think everyone was aware that it was coming and consistent across the board. So, yeah, I can't imagine that they would have too much heartburn over it.
Does the same type of accounting apply to private companies?
Yes, Governmental Accounting Standards Board is typically a year or two behind the FASB or the Financial Accounting Standards Board for private companies. So a lot of publicly traded companies especially have brought on their pension and OPEB liabilities over the last couple of years. So we're kind of catching up to report similar to them.
What's been the experience in the private sector on say, bond ratings or financial health? I mean, because in a sense, you know, these are liabilities that are paid out over. I mean, if everything crashed, you'd owe it. But that's not going to happen.
Absolutely, yeah. No one's going to cut a check for $95 million tomorrow to PERS to pay the pension liability. So yeah, it's based on 30 years of more income that covers those contributions to PERS. If something were to happen to the city, people would probably transfer to other positions and their PERS liability would follow them. You wouldn't then have to cut a check. So it's a governmental accounting standard that you're required to follow, but it's on the government-wide basis only too with the full accrual financial statements. It doesn't impact any of the fund reporting.
Right. I mean, I personally, I think it's a relevant figure to look at. I mean, I get that, and I like to see it. But on the other hand, sometimes, as Supervisor Bagwell mentioned, you could look at that and say, well, you're upside down, but you're really not, because you're never going, unless there's a change in how we do OPEB or something like that, we're never going to cover that.
Right.
That's never going to be, at least on that discrete band, you're never going to be equal or greater.
Uh-huh. And you don't have the ability under the governmental accounting standards to record a receivable for all those future, revenues that are going to come in to pay that liability. So
that's fascinating. Why don't we?
That's a question for the GASB.
I mean, they're asking, they're projecting out and back on the expense side, but not on the revenue side. Is that? I mean, so there is a mismatch there then, in a sense. I mean, okay.
Don't disagree.
I don't know that that's the only mismatch. I mean, when you look at what the actuarial tables are based on, which is an 8% return, which is not necessarily realistic in today's market, if you lower that to a market rate, that number would be so big that everybody in the country would go negative. So, again, you may say that that's a valuable number to look at, but I would respectfully disagree and say that it doesn't really mean anything, not in the real world.
We definitely hear that argument from time to time as well.
Listen, I understand exactly what Supervisor Brad's saying there, but I think a lot of people want to know what that liability is. I mean, and granted, there's a lot of things that go into it, and if you're not careful, you can look at these things on the top line, and if you don't really understand them or know what goes into make them up, you can, reach a conclusion that, that things are amiss, but they're not. But okay, it's an interesting discussion, and I appreciate what he just said there. So
absolutely,
okay.
yeah.
All right, Supervisor Barrett. I'm sorry.
I wish I could agree with Brad that it doesn't mean anything, but it does, and it's our long-term commitment. But I agree also that it doesn't mean as much as it looks like when you just look at it. But it's there, and it will continue. And we now have a situation on the federal level where leverage is coming back like a storm, so we have to watch it closely. So thank you.
All right.
That's all I.
All right. Talk to us about the deficiencies, the material deficiencies. Eat one by one.
Sure, Mike.
I was going to do it. You can't.
We'll do it in the CAFR. We'll do it there. Okay. All right. Any other public comment? I don't see any. All right. This was presentation only. Let's take up the CAFR. Okay. This is item 16 Bravo. Disclosure by Supervisor Bagwell.
Just to be technically correct, to have my disclosure from the last item continue forward. So my son works for Ide Bailey, however, he is not assigned to Carson City and has no involvement whatsoever with the financial report nor the audit that is the subject of this agenda item. Therefore, I will be participating in this matter.
Thank you. All right. All right. You ready? Who's doing this one?
Jason Lake, Chief Financial Officer.
All right.
Jason Lake, Chief Financial Officer. So this is for the acceptance of the 2017 fiscal year CAFR that needs to be filed with the state of Nevada before the end of the calendar year.
So what I'd like to do on the CAFR is actually go to the deficiency discussion and the city's response to those. And if we could just go through the findings, and then we'll look at the corrective action plan. So it's in the back for anybody, if the public, if they're looking at them. It's the back pages in the big bound CAFR. So I'd appreciate if we could go through those.
And just provide more detail on what we found as part of our audit, or?
Yeah, I think that I'd like it to be clear to the public what happened.
Okay.
And
Absolutely.
then we'll look to determine whether or not the corrective action plan is sufficient to meet the opportunity to correct it for the future. Because obviously, we have wonderful staff that take their jobs very seriously. I know here at the board we do. And so we really want to have an opportunity to hone in on how we can correct them so that in the future we can have clean audits with no material weaknesses. That's the goal.
No problem, yeah. So the financial statement finding, 2017A, this is actually on page 202 of the CAFR. We send confirmations on all the city's material bank accounts directly to a bank to have them tell us what the balance is. It's an efficient way for us to test a fairly large dollar amount that's reported in the CAFR. We did receive one confirmation back where the bank confirmed that the balance was actually zero, that the account had been closed. And when we tied it back to the city's financial records, there was still the ongoing balance of about $560,000 sitting in that cash account. So an adjustment was required to zero that account out based on the fact that it had been previously closed.
Okay, so then the response from the city, and so I'm looking for what can we strengthen in our management response to that so it doesn't occur again.
Of course, Supervisor Bagwell. So this year, as you know, our wonderful CFO Nancy we lost, and she's now with the Deputy City Manager's office. So she was doing two jobs while we were putting this CAFR together. And in order to reduce her work a little bit, I had our people in our office review something that Nancy had previously always reviewed. So it was missed. There was a disbursement for the exact balance that it was last year, and then a $0 amount on the statement. And unfortunately, we picked up the disbursement amount and not the zero. So it was an error, and it wasn't properly reviewed. In the future, now that we have a full staff, of course, the good review procedures will be back in place. Excuse me.
But there's no money lost. I mean, this is...
Oh, no, there's no money lost. This is actually an offsetting liability because it's an outside bank account. So there's no revenue expense effect. There's no net asset effect. We decrease the cash as well as the liability done.
Why doesn't that happen automatically when we do those? When there's a transaction like that, why isn't that just done by software program?
I so hope with our new ERP system that will be an option.
I got you. Okay, good. Thank you.
So the error is due to a review process that did not include enough backup material for the reviewer to catch it. So would it be better to write that the procedure will be updated to include backup material with journal entries? I'm looking to write a little more solid corrective action plans so that the accountability going forward, because we just don't want repeat violations, because it costs the city money when we don't have a clean audit. And so for future years, and I know it takes us a couple of years to have a clean audit to reduce our number of programs audited, so that's really what I'm trying to drive to. So instead of just saying it's just a staff error, can we indicate that we're going to improve the actual process on the review of the journal entries?
Well, I think the process is actually intact, though. I think it was honestly an error due to being short-staffed this year. I mean, we were all working so many extra hours. I honestly was trying to reduce a little bit of Nancy's time. She was there till like 9 o'clock every night, and I was there till 7, 8 o'clock every night. So was my staff. So unfortunately, it was my error. I decided to cut a little corner and only give them the spreadsheet instead of all the supporting statements. So we cut that corner, and in future years, when we're fully staffed and we're not working crazy hours, hopefully that error won't occur, because we'll be back to doing our procedure. So I really think this was a one-time error because we were short-staffed. I don't foresee this continuing. I think the procedure is good, and had it been followed, then we wouldn't have had this error.
So then the actual answer is you'll follow the proper procedures in the future?
Yes.
No cutting corners. Okay.
Yes.
Correct. And that's the response that we wrote into management's response, is that we will follow current internal control procedures in the future.
Just to add to that, Nancy Paulson, Deputy City Manager. What happens is we have all of the bank statements, and then someone is keying the balances from the bank statements into the spreadsheet. So, and then the only thing that was included in the backup was the spreadsheet. So in the future, we're going to include the actual source document, so then when someone's approving the journal entry, they can actually check off that, yes, that's the ending balance. Because there's, human error when you're rekeying from the source document. Does that help?
Nancy Paulson once told me that she woke up in the middle of the night from a bad dream about Davis Bacon.
Maybe I was just hungry.
Working too hard.
So financial statement, finding 2017B, this was the one related to amounts that are disclosed in relation to the OPEB. There's a lot of numbers in those disclosures, and it's our understanding that the report that comes from the actuary has various tables in it, and we've gone back and forth with the city on which tables they are supposed to be disclosed in the notes to the financial statements. This year, I think the wrong numbers got picked up out of the wrong table. So both the notes to the financial statements and the RSI had to be updated to match the actuary report. This one will, not to speak to the city's response, but the GASB 75 that we discussed earlier changes, a lot of this stuff. Anyway, the actuary report will be different. The disclosures and RSI will all be different next year. So.
Why is that a material weakness? I mean, that's a clerical error.
Based on the dollar amount of the issue that we found in the disclosures. Yeah. Any questions on that? So as it relates to the single audit, finding 2017 001, we check disbursements to make sure that they're allowed under the grant and meet various other compliance requirements. The sample that we pulled, we looked at 11 out of 70 transactions and found 3 where we couldn't find adequate documentation of review and approval, and also noted that they had previously, 2 of the 3 I think had been previously submitted and reimbursed by the federal or the state pass-through entity. That's where we got to the finding. Based on the number of issues we found, that's where we end up in a material weakness. And based on the fact that those costs had previously been reimbursed and you were reimbursed again, that's where we get to the situation of question costs.
So this one is a repeat type of errors that we've had. And so, and when I look at the corrective action plan, it's the same pretty much answer that we did before. So I'm looking if the city has any ideas. I know that grant draws are there, but what can we do to not have these repeat?
Can I speak to that? Can I speak to that, please? Yeah, so these happened in the first half of the year, and historically, when they give us our findings and we do our corrective actions, it's not until December. So unfortunately, we had already had these issues in the beginning of the year, and they're finding them again this year. So in the past, I know because I used to work there, Kafori Armstrong would consider it corrected if we corrected it after we were told. But Ide Bailey doesn't see it that way, so it's still a finding in the current year, even though it has been corrected in the current year, just in the second half of the current year.
May I clarify? So you're saying that the process is already fixed, so it won't happen again, or has it already happened again this fiscal year? We're going to get the finding again?
No, I'm saying I don't think we should see the finding again next year. There is one that we might see the documentation of the review. We might see that again because they didn't realize they were supposed to be documenting the review. But this particular finding shouldn't happen again because they are reviewing it at the department level before it gets sent out. So we shouldn't see this particular finding again next year. This should go away because it was fixed.
The process?
Last year during the year.
So you're thinking it's a timing?
Yeah.
Issue. So that when we look at the draws for fiscal 18, none of the 18 draws are going to be duplicative.
They shouldn't be because we've implemented that procedure now fully to where all year somebody is second reviewing that draw, so.
And you don't think that, and it's all being done at Public Works, both reviews, the first drawer and then the approver is there, so you don't think any additional review by your central accounting is necessary just to make sure that the training or anything is holding?
I think
or
before
working?
the request goes out, that would be very difficult. Because of the timing of our department. We would have to put it off for a few months in some cases when we're, heavy on the CAFR or when we're really focused on something that we have a deadline for. I think it'd be very hard for us to get it submitted timely. Whereas if the
It's something
department's
that I'm working with Public Works on, and we'll be monitoring those internal controls, and they may change in the future, they may not. But we'll be working with Public Works to make sure that gets corrected.
I like that. So you're going to review the internal control process to see if there's any strengthening?
Correct.
Okay, I can live with that. Thank you.
And we also had a staff change too. So we have somebody new that's implementing their interpretation of the procedures now. So I think that will help as well.
Well, and I think that's really the point that I'm trying to drive home is your internal controls are only as good as the people that interpret them and then follow what the procedure is. And so when we have new staff and staff changes, it's really an opportunity for those to be tested and then verified before we get to Ide Bailey coming and auditing and finding the errors. So I'm just looking for whatever we can do, again, with the objective is to have a clean audit to reduce the cost that the city pays for audit services. That's really all I'm after is accomplishing that.
And we respect that, and that's our intention as well through this process.
Were there any unknown events that happened as a result of these audit deficiencies? Grant problems or anything like that?
I mean, I imagine the question costs were corrected at some point after the fact.
The question costs were corrected on the immediate drawdown afterward, after being notified of the error.
So what's that mean?
So basically, they short drew the next draw to correct for the overdraw previously. Yep.
But were we in violation of any grant?
No, in this particular case, it's an ongoing grant and funding source, and so as soon as we notified NDOT that the correction was being made, they were fine with it.
Right.
So we looked at 11 of 70 transactions, though. So those other 59 transactions, are we going to do some additional review if there's issues with on the draws for these grants? So in other words, on these 11 transactions, we know that we've corrected it by taking a short draw, but there's 59 other transactions that may or may not need to be looked at.
They did an analysis and they short drew the net for the correction for all of them.
I didn't understand that. Please say it again.
So they did a cumulative adjustment on the next draw.
I think the question goes more to, I think, unless I'm misunderstanding Brad, is that now that we know there was an error that was identified, are you going to do some additional testing against the other transactions to ensure we don't have the same internal control issue? I guess that's what we're really leading to, and that's what I meant. Is there, and I agree with Sherry that maybe you're doing that in the off season, that you're doing your own internal control review where you pick a couple of grant transactions and you test them before it gets to.
Actually, our audit committee's on top of that right now. Our internal audit committee's doing a grants procedures on us, and they're looking at fiscal year 17. So
okay,
hopefully they come out with the same problems.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. But anyway, okay.
Yeah.
So we may have taken the net short draw, but that again only affects the 11 transactions that we looked at. If there are mistakes in the other 59 transactions, then there needs to be an adjustment made for those, and we don't want that adjustment to be after a grant is closed.
Correct.
All right. Good comments. Anybody else? Public comments? Anybody want to weigh in back there? Any other? Everybody's asleep with all the numbers?
There's tons of numbers.
I know it sometimes gets a little.
It's the most exciting thing ever, right?
It gets a little non-exciting, but these are important things to discuss. I mean, and so it's important that we all understand what's going on in our city, and it's nice to know also that, we got a clean report from Ide Bailey on this, and we have in the past as well. So, all right. Anybody? I don't see any, so I think we have to take a motion on this one. We're ready for a motion? Who wants to do it?
Okay, I'll do it. I move to accept the Carson City Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2017, and that it's clear that staff will work to review the internal controls to strengthen them so that the errors are not repeated, and that they did a super job, and thank you.
All right, there's a motion and a second on the motion discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay, thank you. Let's take up 16, Charlie, then. Thank you. Dan, thank you.
Just a minute while we transfer staff.
Sure, it's fine.
He wants to take
We'll
the
just sit in
computer.
place here, okay? All right.
While we take this minute, can I take a minute to thank the finance staff? I mean, we really had a tough year with Nancy gone. So, I've got Pam Ganger in the office here in the audience here for questions, and Jamie Stevenson. We really couldn't do the CAFR without them. So.
But you know what? When I walk through there, everybody seems to have a smile on their face, which is that's a good thing. I don't, I mean, it means that people are working hard, but they're also know that they're appreciated. Okay, all right.
We aim to please.
All right. You didn't go out to the dispensary yet, right?
Oh, gosh.
All right.
So, Jason Lake, Chief Financial Officer, and with us is Stephen Ferguson from the Audit Committee, and
Mark Starenka. I'm
going to butcher your last name.
Butcher it.
Stranenka?
Starenka.
from Moss Adams from Seattle. And Mark is here to give us a presentation on the results and what the audit committee has been up to over the last 18 months at this point, and get your approval. So thank you.
All right.
Good morning, Mr.
Good morning.
Mayor.
Good to see you
Other
again.
members of the board. Pleasure to be here, as always. A little cold, though. Woke me up really quickly this morning. I wanted to mention a couple things. So Steve Ferguson's our new audit committee chair. Michael finally found a suitor to take his spot.
Everybody thought it was a lifetime appointment.
Yeah.
Justice, but
And what I was just going to say is, you know, we work with a lot of different audit committees. Some of them are just subsets of boards or councils. Some are a mix of board or council and resident. Here, obviously, it's a mix of 1 and 4. This is probably the best audit committee that we have in terms of expertise, involvement, questions. I would kind of say that the same for the board. You guys are pretty active too in terms of asking questions. So it's a healthy thinking group. Steve's brought a new good perspective, kind of more of a private sector, even though Michael's private sector is CPA, but you've sort of been in and responsible for these roles. So I think it's working really well. And anything you want to add to that?
no, just so far been interesting year, and happy to step in for Michael and give him a little break from the chair and the committee for how many ever years, a long time. So just happy to be here and be involved.
Thank you. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, even though he butchered my last name, you have a good new CFO, because our firm is familiar with him, and you have a good new fire chief, who we're also familiar with. So, in fact, we were chatting on the side this morning and comparing to where he came from and just the different culture and environment that's here, all of which is good and refreshing. So, anyway, for what it's worth, just sharing. So, City Manager's Office recently sort of realized we haven't reported back to the board for a while, and so shame on us, my apologies. So we're doing a little makeup duty today. And so, but I'm going to keep it brief, ask your questions, but I'm not going to spend a whole day talking about 6 reports. So I promise you that. In your packet, so you have this presentation, and then you also have information on the city's corrective actions and progress related to this. I'll reference those, and I don't know if we're going to have a separate presentation on that, but that information is in your packet also. So I'm going to cover kind of what I usually do, just a little bit about kind of our role and our approach, what the components are of an internal audit program, which is kind of our approach. I'll go through 6 projects briefly, and then just touch on what's in our current audit program, which was mentioned, ironically, we're working on grants management, so how fortuitous. Going here. So this is just sort of looking back. So when we started, really, because our role in the various cities that we serve as the internal auditor, there can be different focuses from the board or council or the audit committee. Here, seeing these items, this really sort of says to me performance and compliance, and that's sort of how the program started. And then we've kind of gradually, what I would say, diversified the focus of internal audit to be touching different types of things. And I'm sure you recall me saying before, we try to touch different parts of the city over the course of years in different ways so that you're getting coverage. You can't be in all places at all time, or you'd be spending a ton of money to do that. So you're just trying to make the rounds. And so sort of a more diversified program is always trying to touch on things that are risk related, that are internal controls related, that are compliance and performance related, and getting those in the mix, and to various extents each year, but that's part of having kind of good coverage. And so we aspire to do that each year. So I'm going to talk about 6 projects that have been completed, a couple sort of introductory comments. So one is I'll touch on kind of the objective of each, what are sort of an overview of our findings, some more detail because there was only a couple, and sort of what the status is of each. But what I'd want you to take away from all 6 of these are, you pay us to find ways for the city to improve. And so we're going to have findings, because you always can improve. And you'll see there are varying levels of it. And findings here are opportunities for improvement. They don't get you, in trouble in terms of costs. They can, but not, literally. So you want to have findings, because those are opportunities for improvement. But in all these areas, with the exception of the last one, because it's the most recent report, the city's already taken action. That's reflected in the materials. The management's very responsive. We might get a little resistance. You're sure that's a finding, but they're always taking action, and there's always progress. So that's good, and that's what we're all working together to do, to always get better. So the first one, payroll internal controls. So this is, kind of a classic internal controls area when, how are we handling payroll, what checks and balances are in place. There's a whole slew of different things you can look at for, their time reporting, is it properly reviewed, overtime approvals, pay rates, changes in status of employees. So we take samples. So we only had 2 findings here. And so you have a little bit of detail on those. So on one, you can see 8 out of 10 terminated employees they were still active in the system. So I think we were looking at a 6-month period, and so they were terminated within that 6 month. And when we happened to do the testing, they were still in the system versus having been taken out. Not the end of the world, other than there's the slight opportunity that maybe they would get a payment that you weren't intending them to get. So that's that's something to just sort of clean up and refine. The 10 out of 40 time cards were being signed prior to the pay period being over. That's not your policy and procedure, but I'm sure some of those were probably the supervisor was going to be out of town on vacation, and they did it in advance. And so so that's kind of real life, practical. It's not to the letter of the policies and procedures. So there are other ways you could have someone else do it after, at the appropriate time. So again, not the end of the world, but something that could be addressed pretty easily. So audit committee approved this, and recommended for approval to the board. One of the 2 findings have been completed. One's expected to be completed by the end of this, in 2 weeks. Right? Yeah. And then, interrupt me with questions if you want, or otherwise I'll just kind of keep going. So, P-card testing. This is a place all cities, look at our P-cards, please. How are we doing here? And there can be lots of stuff with P-cards, because the city here uses them, to a pretty significant extent, and that's not a bad thing. Again, only 2 findings, and really these are really nitpicky findings, I would say. So one is that as far as the manual, basically policies and procedures, it really just needs to update, because some of your practices have evolved, and it's just a matter of the manual catching up with those and reflecting them, like using a P card to make certain types of purchases now that you didn't previously. The practice is fine, the policy just needs to catch up. So,
Mark,
yes.
For the general public, so a P card is like a credit card, a procurement card.
Procurement card or purchasing card.
I don't think the general public knows what a P card is, so just in case.
Right, and it's a convenience for the city in terms of its employees to make purchases, and it has good record keeping because you get bank statements for those. And so, what's that?
You also get a great rebate.
And you get a great rebate. Which is why purchasing and that's actually, it's a good point. That's why you're using them, I think, more than previously, and that's part of the policy catching up with the usage. And then you have some shared P cards. So I think fire is a good example of this. So they're out, they're off site, or they're even out of town potentially, and you have more than one person using a card, which is a practical thing. Instead of them all having a card, but then you lose some controls in terms of the usage of that. If all 5 of you were using the same card and there was some issue, we might, so who's the culprit? And so just looking at the policies and procedures around that to reflect that we do have that usage, which aren't really covered in the procedures. Again, so I'd say kind of nitpicky, but things that can easily be addressed. Small works, so kind of shifting gears here from internal controls to more sort of process. So we did this project, or built it into the internal audit program, because we did have a couple of reports from the ethics hotline with concerns about particular projects, which were things that were looked into, but basically that became a catalyst for, okay, let's, it was an area we kind of wanted to look anyway, and it was kind of just a little kick in the butt saying, okay, let's go look at that now. And so we looked at the small work projects, under 300K size projects, and really just following the life of the project and how we're accounting for them. And we took projects that have multiple disciplines, so they have some complexity in the accounting for it. And I think at the particular time, Public Works had already had a draft procedures in place to deal with this. And so we had some of our testing without it and some of our testing with it. And, what our sort of summary sort of findings were, can make some tweaks to the policy relative to the accounting, some of the general ledgers. Some of the documentation will be improved with the new work order system. We recommended doing some quarterly reporting to be able to just give some visibility to these activities, so then you have the ability to kind of look and say, okay, this is what we did. Did we follow our processes? Did we have the right end result? So really just about how can we improve processes, and it's already happening, and it's all, I think, all good. You can see 3 completed out of 4. So, and again, in 2 weeks, no, not 2 weeks. How many days? 10 days. 10 days. I can't count. I'm not an accountant, though. One of our ex-audit committee members there, you heard it, he's like, who said accountants can be nice? And I said, well, I'm not an accountant. So. Public guardian. So this was one for the city manager's office that requested this, and I think I'd like to just encapsulate this with a couple comments. So what I think we basically kind of looked at the practices, how are we disposing assets in there, and the public guardian it's kind of, I'll put it in the social service bucket. It's focused on delivering service and not necessarily operations and all that stuff that just gets in the way, record keeping and documentation and all that stuff, which, on one hand is understandable, but we don't have the luxury of living in that world. And so this was all about, okay, how can that function have better sort of accounting, not a little accounting for what they do, tracking, documentation, and so very receptive to that. Already have had a lot of activity. You're already getting reports, quarterly reports. I think you have one today again, and that's fantastic. And that was our sort of 2 bottom line takeaways is, okay, now there needs to be some discipline to operations, add that to the service they're delivering, and that's happening, and give the board more visibility to what's actually happening there, which is happening. So I think this is on a great trajectory. Part of our audit program, I'll print my last slide, is to do a review of their progress at the end of this fiscal year. And so we'll have a little, touch back in there, but it's going good and you're getting reports, so we feel good. Purchasing and AP controls. So now we get more back into classic, okay, well, geez, you have 12 findings here. Well, you have a lot of activity here. These are classic things of opportunities to tweak documentation and the segregation of duties in certain instances. Bottom line here is nothing earth-shattering, plenty, a decent amount of opportunities to improve, already doing it. And actually, I think this is one of the areas, I would say this again in my infinite wisdom, IT has strengthened in the city, and I think purchasing has strengthened in the city. And so we feel good about the trajectory that's happening in here. And then our last one is HTE access, so basically your enterprise system or financial system. And this is really just about, okay, for every employee, what access do they have to the system, and do they have the right access? And so the best kind of example of the opportunity for improvement here is, and this informational stuff that Eric will just take and use, and some of it he already knows anyway, but I'll give you an example. So we have a vacancy, we hire someone, the default is that person gets the same access that the person that they filled a position of. Well, that access aren't regularly reviewed, so they might not have the right access, but by default they get it. And then, or another example would be, I change duties, I move from one department to the other, my access doesn't necessarily get changed, so I might be able to see stuff that either I shouldn't, or at worst case or at best case, I don't need to. And so it's a pain in the butt to be able to have to go and check this all the time, but it's something that you should do regularly. The system's not particularly helpful in this case, so it makes it more work than you would like it to be. Back to the comment about new enterprise system and it doing more work for you. So there's some sort of cleanup opportunity here, but it's easy stuff to do, and it's just a matter of how much of it do you do through HTE and how much do you do through a new enterprise system. But you want to have a little bit more rigor on this than you do, so that the examples I gave, which I think are fairly, I'll say, regular, that gets addressed. Again, but not end of the world, but you don't want to be creating opportunities for fraud or anything like that, people being able to get access to things that they don't need to or you don't want them to. 3 other projects that I'm not reporting on. These were all just kind of process improvement projects versus doing audits where we have findings or recommendations. Really just had recommendations. One was a policy and procedure review. One was taking a deeper dive on cash and revenue collection. And then we were involved in doing some lean work, actually a couple of years ago, but it never came to you. But I just wanted to make sure you're aware that those things had happened, all good stuff. And then this, just so you know what's in this year's internal audit plan or program, each year our budget's 110. The 2 sort of prominent projects are the grants, internal controls testing, which will have an element of travel expense in there. We're doing sort of the follow-on project to the small works, one that I just reported on large public works projects, again, kind of following the life of some projects, looking for a process improvement opportunity. We're going to build into the program. This is one of the things that our audit committee chair brought to us. Hey, we should be doing something on IT security, which we will before the end of the fiscal year. And then you can see the public guardian follow-up, and then some of our kind of just regular stuff of managing the program, validating findings, and being the recipient of your what we call fraud, waste, and abuse, or ethics hotline, of which we get a report about. It's probably on average one every month and a half, so not quite every month, and so we deal with those. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and answer any questions that you have. So thank you.
So, Audit Chair, want to raise any additional comments or comment?
It was I believe, productive year. I mean, I don't have any perspective on prior years, but looking at what was completed for for this calendar year, I think Moss Adams and the city team did a great job, addressing issues that the city has for improvement, and I think we're making progress moving forward. So pretty good, and Lori might have better perspective being on the committee for longer, but I think we make great progress this year.
Well, I really want to say that staff is very responsive whenever it's not a technology barrier. So I wanted to put that on the record, that even though we have one finding left to complete in an area, it really is technology that is stopping the full implementation of something, or that the cost to implement it would be so much more expensive than the gain. And so that's why some of the findings, the audit committee just said close it until the proper technology. So I just wanted to put that on the record. It's not that an opportunity didn't arise that is a good idea, but again, if the cost is so exorbitant to do it manually, it doesn't make any sense to put the process in, but that will continue to watch them when we move into HTE, new procurement. We'll have some opportunities to maybe just circle back and look if we can pick something up, or that we make sure the issues are addressed when we go out to bid for the HTE, that we're sure to capture those in the RFP so that we can eliminate those opportunities. But great job, staff and Moss Adams and the audit committee.
I just wanted to add, related to the HTE replacement, we do have demonstrations for 2 subsequent vendors scheduled for January. And so hopefully that's beginning to move forward fairly quickly.
Thank you. Perhaps I'm being dense, but could you go into the grants part you mentioned earlier, and then where is that?
Thank you. Yeah, actually, and I neglected, so we're on the right slide. The grants management and large public works, we're actually, both projects are underway. We're just about, I believe, to do our sampling on the grants, so we've been identifying our pool. And our next audit committee meeting is February, right? So we may be done in February for that, but so I'll say we're midpoint in that project.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because this is an area I've watched government at all levels for years. My wife's involved in pass-throughs, federal funding down to local, and it's a problem. It's just, as you say, it's sometimes not the end of the world, but it costs money, and it can get lost.
And when I was listening to the conversation from Ide Bailey, grants management is a great example of, it's a decentralized activity. And so your question is about, okay, well, what can finance do to help? And so this isn't a negative on Public Works or anyone who's on the decentral end of it, but it's how can centrally you help with guidance, policy, could be training, monitoring, so that you're getting more consistency across. Cash handling will be the same. There's all sorts of examples of that things are happening decentrally, and you kind of have that rub of, okay, how do we find the right balance between what we do centrally and what we do decentrally? And so that was kind of the conversation you were having, and that's a classic conversation for this type of topic.
Anybody else on the board? Public comment? Anybody want to weigh in? Presentation only? Anybody want to? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you, Mark. Let's take up the next item then. You want?
You are. So if I'm done, Merry Christmas. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Let's take up 16 Delta.
Jason Lake, Chief Financial Officer. So the agenda item before you is the completion of the remediation plans that are presented to the Carson City Audit Committee. Upon approval of the Board of Commissioners, the completed findings will be considered closed and removed from the audit finding tracking summary sheet as prepared by Moss Adams. They will be moved to an archive sheet related to that, with your approval.
Audit Committee okay with all this?
Yes.
All right. Public comment? All right. Motion's in order.
I move to accept the Audit Committee's recommendation to approve the completed remediation plans from the Community Facility Cost Recovery Study, Employee Efficiency Study, Internal Controls Review, Policy and Procedures Review, Payroll Internal Controls Testing, Small Works Projects Review, Public Guardian Review, and the Purchasing Accounts Payable Internal Control Testing, and remove the completed findings from the Audit Findings Tracking Summary Report.
Second.
Motion second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, I was just going to make one comment about that. I just wanted you to know that that audit findings tracking, we would consider, so again, we do this for a lot of cities. How we do it here, I would consider a best practice. We just 2 days ago sent your audit findings tracking report to City of Santa Monica, who's also a client, much bigger client, a lot more money, but just getting into this. And so I just wanted you to know that you guys are vanguards a little bit, at least from our perspective. So.
Head of the power curve. All right.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
All right. I appreciate it very much. And give our thanks to the Audit Committee. All right. 17, this is discussion and possible action on the CMAR contract for South Carson Street. Who's doing it? Laura, you going to give us the top line?
Good morning, Laura Rader, Purchasing and Contracts. This is to approve Contract 1718-083 CMAR South Carson Street Complete Street Project to Sierra Nevada Construction for a total not to exceed amount of $63,007, which will be funded from the Infrastructure Fund. Mr. Dan Stuckey, as well as staff from Sierra Nevada Construction, are here to answer any additional questions.
Dan.
Good morning,
Board.
Board.
How you doing?
Good, good.
I like your job.
I really like it.
All right.
It's
Better say that.
fast paced. You never know what's coming in the door, but it's fun. Dan Stuckey, City Engineer for the record. So as Laura mentioned, this is related to the South Carson project. It's a complete street project with some utility improvements from 5th Street down to I-580 US 50 interchange. We're in the process right now, and staff have almost done forming our project team, and one of the big steps was bringing the construction manager at risk, or CMAR, on board. That's where we have from Sierra Nevada Construction today. I want to introduce Dan LeBlanc. He's a vice president over there, and also Emma Crossman, project manager over there. They're going to be two of the real key members from that team involved on this project, so we welcome them today. Thanks for spending a lot of your morning here. Anyway, we staff internally evaluated, whether to use a traditional design bid build approach to a project or use the CMAR method. We felt this project was a good fit. It's larger, complex. That corridor is very busy business corridor, so we felt bringing a CMAR and doing that project delivery method was a good way to go. And obviously, we've had a lot of past success with that. With the downtown project was a CMAR project. The wastewater treatment plant, the phase 1 was a CMAR project. RFP went out in late September for the CMAR services. It was very competitive. We interviewed 3 contractors for this, and S&C just really stood out as the right fit for this project. They've done a lot of work in Carson City over the last 5 years. They're very familiar with how we like our projects built and how the city kind of operates down here. And they also have a lot of really good CMAR experience up in the Reno area on very applicable projects, so we think that'll be a good fit here. I wanted to be clear that this contract that we're approving today is for pre-construction services, so this is not a construction contract. Sometimes it's a little confusing because they are a contractor. So the pre-construction services that they will be performing is, they'll be a part of our design from start to finish. They'll do constructability reviews, scheduling and sequencing of construction activities, construction cost estimating, value engineering, and they'll also be involved on the public outreach side. So when we go out and go to the businesses out there, they're going to be able to talk as how we're going to phase construction and really try to have the least amount of impacts to their businesses. So that's, I think, a really, really good value of the CMAR process.
Dan, if I could jump in there for just a second.
Yeah.
Does this mean that Sierra Nevada Construction does not intend to submit a bid for the construction portion of South Carson Street?
No, the CMAR process, as we advance the design at the very end, we will negotiate a value for construction with S&C. That's the plan forward. So
got it. Same way we did with the wastewater treatment. So.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay.
We're really excited. The city staff is going to be the lead designer on this project, so our engineers are really excited about that. I think it's going to be a great project for the city, and I know both the staff and Sierra Nevada Construction really know, obviously the value of that corridor and how significant it is to the city, so we're excited about that. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Okay. So my only concern is, what if we don't get the Tiger grant? Then is this project scale has to change immensely. And so we're prepared. I just don't want you doing a whole bunch of work and finding out, change it all, and then we've spent money that we'll have to re-spend. It's just a question timing-wise.
Yeah. First of all, I think we're going to win the Tiger grant, so I want to put that out there. I'm really positive on that, and I think we will find out on that hopefully in the next couple of months, so wee'll keep our fingers crossed for that.
I sent a Christmas card to DOT and the guy and just wished him Merry Christmas, and I didn't just wished him Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah, if the Tiger Grant doesn't come in, I mean, I think we're either going to look at how we reallocate the infrastructure fund, and I don't know if that's really my place to talk, but we'll have to look at either keeping the project the same and figuring out other funding sources, or, you know, maybe scaling it back a little bit. But I don't think, as far as, you know, the initial design process, I don't think we're wasting any efforts there, not knowing how the Tiger Grant's going to go. I think this is time well spent to advance the conceptual design to a 30%.
My question is the PR aspect, and that's huge, and it was on Carson Street. And so if you could just describe to me a little bit of your approach to businesses and trying to lessen the impact on them and your communication ability with that, because that is a huge part of the impact of construction.
Yeah, and thank you. And for the record, Dan LeBlanc, Vice President of Construction and the Seymour team leader for this project. To speak on that, this job is obviously for us, the construction is a very easy part of it. The hard part is exactly what you're referring to, it's the businesses. And that's what we love about the Seymour process, why we are excited to be part of this. We're currently implementing a business relations plan on the Virginia Street corridor with the RTC right now up in Reno. We're going through the same thing, and we're going to take a lot of the lessons learned from that job right down here in Carson, and it's about the businesses, and it's about making them feel like this is their project, they're part of the team, and you listen to them, you build that relationship, you build that trust, you understand their concerns, you understand their access constraints, you understand their business hours, and you incorporate all that into our plan, and that's what we get to do before we even break ground on the job. So we're actually starting that. Dan and his team has set up meetings in early January. We have a public relations consultant that we've worked with before that will be on our team. That's her sole job, is to help us develop that plan and build on our past experience with that to really make the businesses feel like they're part of the job and get them excited about it. So.
And just to follow up on that, unexpected surprises as you go through the construction process. How do you deal with that in terms of the businesses? Because, of course, it will impact schedule and accessibility and all of that.
Yeah, first of all, construction never has unexpected surprises. It always goes smoothly per plan. That happens. We know that happens. We plan for those. We have plan A, B, and C at all times. Again, that's what's so great about this process is we can build that into our schedule and our way of thinking. So we know they're coming, and part of our job is to facilitate that, be flexible, and be understanding of those surprises.
So the room has, looks like most of the, if not all of the major players that are going to be involved in this project. So, you know, I just want to be on the record here today as saying that when we started this process 5 years ago, that we made a commitment to the public and to businesses that we would do this right. And we wouldn't take shortcuts in the scope of work because we didn't make the effort or couldn't find the funding. So this scope of work for the South Carson project has been determined by public outreach, looking at different designs, and doing the job the right way at the best value. So if we don't get the Tiger Grant, the solution is not to cut back on the scope of work. The solution for us is going to be to go out and find the funding to do the correct scope of work, because we still have 2 to 3 more phases of these corridor improvements to do, and we're not going to start short shrifting on phase 2 of this project, not while I'm sitting here. So I just want to be very clear that we will make every effort to go out and find the funding from another source if we don't get the Tiger Grant, because we're not going to start doing things poorly or inadequately just because we haven't done our job, which is to go out and find the funding.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't here 5 years ago, so Brad doesn't speak for me. No, I'm kidding. We should do this right. There's no doubt about it. Can you go through the phasing of the design, and can you tell us a little more about your company?
Yeah, so the design's going to be, we'll have like a 30%, 60%, 90% type submittal milestones. So each one of those submittals, S&C will be a part of us between the milestone submittals, but at each milestone submittal, we'll really sit down with them. They'll do cost estimating. I mean, one of the advantages of the CMAR is you're updating your costs as you go, so you know your costs at the end, which is really great. So we'll be doing value engineering, cost estimating, starting to look towards the end at how we're going to sequence construction and obviously the public outreach. So we'll have those 30, 60, 90 milestones. So that'll kind of be how we set it up.
And do you have target dates for that, and will you come back to us for the public so that they understand?
Absolutely, yeah. So our plan is to come back, I think, at 30 and 90 back to the board, and we'll also be going to RTC for that as well.
60 falls in a black hole?
Yeah, maybe we'll come back all three, yeah. I thought it was 30, 90, but yeah, we can definitely do that.
And your company, a little more?
Yeah, so Sierra Nevada Construction, we're a mid-sized general engineering contractor. We're based out of Sparks, Nevada. Been in business since 1989. We specialize, I'll kind of give you our presentation speech. We specialize in really three main things. We know what we're very good at, and that's reconstruction projects, underground utilities, and we do a lot of the slurry seals, micro seals, chip seals. You've probably seen us in that exact corridor working with NDOT, doing work last year. But we're a family-owned company. It's still two sole owners, Kevin Robertson and Craig Holt, still very active in the business. They've put people in place, such as myself, to really grow S&C to what it is, and to build our reputation throughout all of Carson City, City of Reno, City of Sparks. And that's and what's one thing we're very proud of, it's sitting in front of people like you today, getting to brag about how great we are and the type of work we do, because we are proud of it, and we build our name on reputation, such as what we're going to do with the businesses out there. But we do a lot of reconstruction projects with Carson City, the RTC, Regional Transportation Commission, the City of Reno, the City of Sparks. It makes up. We do about $80 million a year in the underground private work reconstruction. We do about $30 to $40 million in chip seals, slurry seals, microservicing, small patching type of work. So this is the type of work we do. It's really who we are. We're very, very good at it, and we have a very, very specialized team that's going to be on this project.
Thank you for that. I just want the public to know, those who are paying attention, that this project's in good hands. Thank you.
Yeah, I've talked to some of your clients in Reno, and you get very good reputation, so.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. Any other public comments, public discussion on this one? Anybody? Board, any other comments? Motion's in order.
I move to approve contract number 1718-083, CMAR South Carson Street Complete Streets Project to Sierra Nevada Construction, Inc. for a total not to exceed amount of $63,007 to be funded from the Infrastructure Fund.
There's a motion and there's a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We look forward to working with you guys. Make sure you get out early and meet all the businesses on that corridor. Yeah. All right. Particularly the car dealers, please. Okay.
Don't worry, they'll reach out.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about that one.
All right. All right. Let's take up the last one, and then after this one, we are going to we'll do our staff updates and stuff like that. Then we're going to hold a non-meeting meeting with the lawyers to talk about pending litigation and other things that under the attorney-client issues. Okay. Deborah, give us your update.
Good morning.
Presentation only.
Thank you. The report that you guys have is from it's up to 11:30 on our numbers. The number of full-time employees, again, is 3. Social work interns, 2. Appropriate referrals per quarter is 2. Right now, we have 38 in skilled nursing, 10 in assisted living. In their own home, we have 8. In a group home, we have 8. Out-of-state placements are 7. Deceased clients not closed is 5, and again, that's as of 11:30. Dropped cases, 2. Pending cases, 2. And not placed, 1. Fees we've collected from September 2017 through the end of November is $6,711.81. And the number of clients we have on Medicaid or pending is 57. We've had a rough 3 months, losing 7 clients to death. One this office had for 17 years, so way before me. With the help of our interns, we made all the ornaments for our senior tree, and that they were put up right after Thanksgiving, and all the tags were taken, and all the gifts were delivered this week, except for one that I still have to get out. With the changes to the NRS, we have had to account for our time, 2 hours a month at $180 an hour. The court is no longer accepting blanket 2-hour increments, so we came up with new forms to track all of our activities for each client. This includes time spent on court appearances, phone calls, emails, care conferences, visiting, transport to doctor's office, banking, etc. This has been an eye-opening experience, as we can see the actual amount of time we spend on each client far exceeds the 2-hour hours that we bill. We've had a struggle with placement of clients to the appropriate setting because there are not enough resources in Nevada, and especially in the north. We have partnered with Northern Nevada Correctional Center to transition inmates with dementia to the outside, which has been a difficult process due to the client's past crimes. We currently have a former inmate with severe dementia who was a sex offender, and no skilled nursing facility in our state or others would take him. Unfortunately, he died at BHS before he could be placed. I had IT install a scanning folder to our desktops that is in line with what we had out of the audit. And I was able to procure a storage unit with the guidance of Nancy Paulson, thank you, for items belonging to clients that need to be held for 90 days, per the new NRS guidelines. And our interns are currently on winter break and will return in late January. That's my report. Do you have any questions?
I'll just comment that, again, thank you for working so hard to meet the audit. You're doing a good job, and I think it's an improved accountability for your office.
Right.
And I was happy to hear you actually say it really surprised you when you looked at the documentation. It drove it home to you how much. So
how much
thank
time
you.
that we spend in each client.
And I just want to thank you for your service, because this is an immense job.
It is. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Anybody else? Public comments, anybody want to weigh in? I don't see any. This is presentation only. Merry Christmas, Deborah.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
All right. All right, let's take up item 19, Board of Supervisors reports. Anybody? Go. Go.
I
Comments?
have two comments to make. First, I usually go into the City Hall before or after hours. So I was in there between 6:30 and 7 the other morning. Laura Rader was already in the office working. So thought that was very interesting. Our staff does a really good job, and I don't think we give them enough acknowledgement sometimes, but they work really hard. Also, today is the winter solstice, and unlike the Incas, I think we've now evolved, and I'm not aware of any human sacrifices that are scheduled for today. So everybody enjoy your 9.5 hours of 35-degree daylight today.
Yes, last night we had Airport Authority meeting, and the board unanimously approved what we will be looking for in the next manager, massaging what some of our new members put together. There was one person who testified and obviously wasn't pleased with what we were doing, and he pointed out that one member was at his first meeting. One of the members who was involved in this was at his second meeting. Another member was at his second meeting. I'd been there for a year, and we had 2 absent, and the chairperson has longer tenure than I do. I pointed out that our deceased friend Bob Thomas was very strong in saying we should only have 4-year terms for airport, and then everybody's out. So I'm proposing that we've already talked about this, I think, a little bit, that we think about that situation, because while we didn't agree with his points, it does point up that there is a loss of institutional memory over time, although the mayor's law partner, Steve Takis, gives us a lot of institutional memory. But we need a new airport manager, and we're proceeding. So I just have you put that in your pipe and smoke it, because I think institutional memory is of value, and we would probably have trouble here if we had 3 or 4 new members on a situation. I did point out to the person who appeared before us that the newest member has a manufacturing background. Bradley Harris, it was in human resources and helped with getting that done, and that our other new member has aviation experience and is on the airport. But we should think about that. So just for your consideration.
Anybody else? Let me just say, yesterday morning, I don't know who was down there. Karen, I know, was down there. Holiday with a Hero at Walmart was unbelievable. We had a lot of volunteers. Walmart did a great job. Our fire people and our cops, Public Works, and all the volunteers from different organizations. It's what brings the community together. And I know Karen was down there wrapping presents. Maybe everybody else was down there wrapping. There were so many people you couldn't see who was doing what. But, it gives you a good feeling that at Christmas time, and I'd like to think we do it at all times of the year, but people in this community look out for each other, and, they take it to heart. And yesterday was a good explanation, or a good example of that. So my hat's off to Holiday with a Hero and everybody who participated in that one. It was wonderful. So other than that, winter solstice, are we supposed to sacrifice somebody?
I'm sure there's people out there that would volunteer me.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know.
The whole board, maybe.
Whole board. I was going to say, maybe we ought to go outside and, all right. Anything further before we, let's see, because the next step is we're going to adjourn, and then we're going to adjourn till 1:30 when we go here, and then we'll take up those things, and then we'll do some redevelopment stuff this afternoon. And right now, as we recess, we're going to talk to our lawyers. Again, it's going to be a non-meeting meeting, so if you're down here and you see the doors closed, it's not because we're trying to keep people out. It's just one of those things. All right. Are we ready? All right. We're in recess until 1:30.